Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Hype. I'm Alfred Edney Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor-at-Large at Black Enterprise, and this edition of Beyond the Hype is brought to you by Now and Later, the long-lasting chew. Welcome to the show. Listen, we've been hearing for years, better part of a decade and a half, that Black women entrepreneurs, Black women founders represent the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the country, that we have been driving, or Black women and brown women, Latino women have been driving entrepreneurial growth in America in terms of the numbers of business started. But here's what's beyond the hype. Where is the financing? Where is the funding for these businesses? We know that Black female-owned businesses and Black founders are just grossly underfunded. And that's what we're going to talk about today with our guest, my good friend, my little sis, my niece, my mentee, whatever you want to call her. I love her to death. The founder of the Boss Network, and also now Dr. Cameka Smith. Welcome to the show, Cameka.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You know, you are one of my favorite people in the entire world, and BE is like family, so I'm glad to be here.
But let's before we kind of dive into this topic of what Black women founders could be doing if they were properly funded, if they're growing this rapidly without the funding. Talk about the Boss Network journey. I mean, you know, this is only the second time we've talked since we've come out of the pandemic shutdown. You are now Dr. Smith. I know you're going through some personal and business transitions. Talk to me about your journey over the last couple of years and kind of give the Beyond the Hype audience an idea what the Boss Network is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was just telling someone today, I love telling a story. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 14 years now, so it's like second nature to me. You know, it's like talking to, my girlfriends and my guys when I'm talking about what I do for a living, because it has become such a big part of who I am. And, my journey started probably about almost 14 years ago here in Chicago, born and raised here in Chi-Town. And, I think the city has a lot of rich history of Black entrepreneurship. I didn't grow up in a family of entrepreneurs, but I definitely grew up in a family of hustlers. And so, I grew up in a community where, just everyone did whatever they could to take care of their families. My mom, she was very dedicated to the church. And so we did a lot of things within my church that were very enterprising, like, feeding the homeless, giving away backpacks during school time, just giving back. Like that was a big part of my upbringing, like that servanthood. And so my mom, as a single mother, she was she was an entrepreneur. She cooked dinners, she sold dinners, she did hair, she did braids. I mean, she was like the lady in the neighborhood that everybody came to when they wanted something beautiful done or they wanted to eat good. So I just watched her, work two jobs and have her side hustles. And it just inspired me to honestly not really want that lifestyle, because I just felt like, I don't want to work that hard, but it also gave me this motivation, like, I can make it happen. I got to figure out a couple of things to do, but I can make it happen if I work hard. And so she was the person who really, I think, I said this recently to someone. My mom was, the baby of 8. So she watched all of her siblings, kind of create their own life migrating from Mississippi. And they lost their mom when my mother was 2. So that upbringing was really tough for them, but they stuck together. Family was super important to them. And so they all migrated here from Mississippi once they became like of age, which was like 14, 15. So my mom was the last to come at 14. And, she just worked hard to try to build a life for herself. And I think for me, just seeing, that type of family oriented closeness, but then also trying to understand like, what our history looked like. And my mom, I think because she didn't have a mother figure in her life, it was important to her to know where she came from. So she was super into Black history. She was super into the culture and where she came from. She didn't graduate from high school, but she ended up going back to get her, GED. But that was something that she really instilled in us. And I think her learning about her history and reading history books, it really propelled her to really believe in herself as a single mom. Like, if I couldn't do it for me, I can make this happen for my children. And so she really taught us about, where we came from, our ancestors, and how hard they worked. And if they overcame all the things that they overcame with that little bit of resources and support, what can you accomplish, Cameka? What can you do in life? And so that propelled me so much to the point where when I graduated from college, her gift to me was the encyclopedia, the Black History Encyclopedia. And I was like, okay, I would have liked a car, but Alfred, reading those stories, it just motivated me in so many ways. And I'm like, wow, like, you know what? I can be an entrepreneur. I can be someone that has a huge impact on this world if I work hard enough. And that's what I did by going to college and choosing the career that I chose, which was a service-based career, and getting into education. And yeah, I think that's where kind of it all begins. I was laid off back in 2009, with probably half of the country. And at that time, it really propelled me to say, maybe this entrepreneurship thing is something I should be looking into more, and not just looking at it as a hustle, but maybe I can actually be a full-time entrepreneur. And so that's how, the start of the Boss Network kind of began.
So wow, Cameka, that's really an inspiring story that kind of lays the groundwork for what led you to entrepreneurship in particular and starting the Boss Network. But talk about what the Boss Network is, or what it was when it started, and what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, when I got laid off, I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur full time. At the time, I had an event marketing company because I was, always doing some things on the side. So I became what they call now an influencer. Back then, it was like a, brand ambassador. So I had worked on the side for like companies like BMW, Nike, Crown World, doing like influencer marketing and ambassador programs here in Chicago. And so I always wanted my own event marketing firm so that I could actually, reach out to these brands and work with them and create these social impact type of campaigns. But I will tell you, Alfred, it was not as easy as it was when I was doing it part-time, right? Because, as a full-time entrepreneur, you got to figure out how to make the money, pay the bills, build a team. And it was a different beast. And so for me, I felt like, you know what? If I want to do this full time, I need to get some mentors. I need to learn from some people who have done it. This is not just a hustle anymore. This is a full-time business that I'm trying to create here. So I just went on this journey of talking to different entrepreneurs, asking friends and family, did they have friends that were entrepreneurs? Could they connect me with them? And I think through those conversations, I realized, wow, I'm learning so much. If I can bring this information to my community, how many other people can I help? And so just as an event planner, I just created a series of events that I called Boss. And I was very specific about creating this acronym because people knew that I did like social events in Chicago. And I was like, this is not a party. This is not a social event. This is about business. So the acronym was Bringing Out Successful Sisters, because I wanted to bring Black women together to talk about how do we create success? How do we create lives that we are actually proud of? And how do we climb the corporate ladder or build businesses? And that's how that conversation started. And I think I did my first series of events over the summer in 2009. And it grew so fast that people started emailing me saying, how do we join Boss? And I was like, okay, join. I was like, well, these are just events. It's nothing to join. And that's when the entrepreneur in me kicked in and said, you know what, maybe I can create, a community for Black women just to talk about business. And I did my research on because I knew I didn't want a traditional, community. I didn't want to have meetings every week. I didn't want to, be just a local brand. I always wanted to be a global brand. And so I decided to make it a digital platform. And that's when we launched the bossnetwork.org, which was a platform to bring Black women together, minority women, to talk about business, careers, and how do we create the success in the life that we want through entrepreneurship and, and climbing the corporate ladder. So that's kind of how it all started.
And along the way, obviously, you caught the attention of us in business media. I know you were recognized by Forbes. You were the Boss
Yeah.
Network was an important partner of Black Enterprise for events such as
Yeah.
our Entrepreneur Summit. So
Mhm.
you're right. There are a lot of great local small business groups for Black people, for women, for Black women in different cities. They all do great work. But you really did, in a way, pioneer. Like I said, you were the first. It's fairly common in the age of social media to have these kind of broad digital networks and broad digital communities.
Now.
But the
Yeah.
Boss Network was one of the first, if not the first, that
Yeah.
created that kind of community that could connect women across the country around this idea of sharing information and resources to be successful.
Yeah, you know what, Alfred, it's interesting because when you said that, I was like, wow, you know what? I do believe that we were probably the first, because when I started doing my research, I didn't see any communities for Black women. I mean, of course, there was like, Black Enterprise, there was the National Urban Leagues, there were these organizations that have been staples in our community for years, but it wasn't anything like the Boss Network. There wasn't a platform where women could come and talk about their issues. And so what I just did was looked at Facebook. Facebook was like my ideal community. Like, okay, if I can create this for Black women to talk about business and actually have a place to network beyond the events, that to me was like the sweet spot. So I, launched the bostonword.org, the digital platform in like the fall of 2009. And within 6 months, we were listed in Forbes magazine as one of the top 10 websites for women, one of the top 10 websites for entrepreneurs and career women. And that to me just was like, oh, crap, like this must be something that can actually, really take legs. Because in the beginning, for me, it was just like, I was building a business. I was just creating this platform for us as women to have a place to, network and talk. I didn't really look at it as a business. I was trying to build my, event marketing firm. But then when I saw, that validation and those accolades from Forbes, I was like, well, maybe this is actually a business within itself. And that's when I started deep diving and looking more into like communities, looking at how to build a business. And of course, I mean, Black Enterprise is a staple in the business community for African Americans. And so I just immersed myself in every article, every event that I could, attend. And that's how I built a relationship with Black Enterprise, who really gave me the confidence and a platform to be seen as a thought leader, to share, my journey and my story, to say, hey, this is someone who's doing some great things in the Black community. We need to support her and recognize her. And that's how I was able to kind of start building other relationships with brands like Essence Magazine, and then looking at bigger corporate brands like, Chase and Prudential and Pepsi. And so it really was that kind of like, Cinderella story where, you see something that you really admire, and then you become a part of it. Like, how wonderful is that?
Yeah. But I really don't want to get down to what we're talking about today, and I've had this conversation again with other guests on Beyond the Hype. Recently with Malika Rogers Berry, who is the head of the Southern Women and Girls Consortium. It's a nonprofit consortium designed to bring together resources for women and girls organizations in the South. And when we talked about this whole idea of Black Girl Magic and this whole, and I said, we celebrate, but we don't necessarily elevate. We celebrate what Black women are accomplishing, but we don't do anything to elevate what they're accomplishing. So in many ways, and when we look at the gap, we look at the one thing on this side that says Black women entrepreneurs are doing it like never before and growing faster and in greater numbers. But on the flip side, and I know you have some numbers, but I just got a few interviewing for this show, Nasir Qadri, who is the founder of Zeal Managing Partners, is a VC fund for Black companies. And he has a partnership with Synchrony Ventures. And we were talking about the numbers from Crunchbase just on VC money, and that 2021 was the high. And even in that year, only 1.3% of VC money went to, and it wasn't just Black, went to Black, Latinx, and women. Like you're talking about all the quote unquote minorities got 1.3%, and that was a high. And I mean, that was just in the VC space. But there's other sources that where there's grants, loans, angel investing, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to me about. One, this is a mission that kind of came to you during the pandemic, so I don't want to get ahead of your story. But talk to me about what you're doing now, why you're doing it, and addressing this whole issue. That it's wonderful to talk about how, yes, you're starting businesses in bigger, greater numbers more rapidly than ever before, but you're not getting the investment that reflects the values of the services that you're bringing to the marketplace.
Right. You know what, Alfred, you said something that was so poignant in the beginning, and you were saying how we are so ready to celebrate Black women and Black businesses and minority communities, but we will not do what it takes to elevate those. We want to celebrate what they've done and what we've always done, which is persevere through our struggles. And we want to celebrate that, right? But then we don't want to do anything to help elevate what we're working towards. And so a lot of people, I think they see me as a founder of an organization, and they see me as this great leader, which is amazing, but I'm also a small business, right? And so for me, I just had this conversation today with one of my colleagues about how, I'm like, I don't need another business award. I got a shelf of 20 awards in business, but how many people can say they invested, in the Boss Network, right? So it's like, I have all these corporate brands that want to, elevate me or celebrate me rather as this leader in the community doing great things for Black women, but it's like, write me a check. And I'm gonna be real honest, it gets daunting for leaders to work hard to try to do something and make change. And then the same people that talk about wanting to support that don't give you the support that you need to continue. And so for me, I think that the pandemic really took the band-aid off a lot of things, or the mask off a lot of things, when people were just like tired, like, okay, listen, we saw what happened with the PPP loans. These grants were supposed to be given to, communities that needed it the most, small businesses that needed it the most, but we were the ones that were left out, and big corporate was the ones that got access to the funding. And so at that point, I just did what I always do. I said, okay, if I can't get the support, how do I build something to help my community? Because I saw my business struggling, but I also saw the women that I serve really trying to figure out, how do I keep going? And they were looking to me as a leader, like, hey, do you have any resources? Do you have any contacts? Do you have any access to capital? And that's when I decided to launch the Boss Impact Fund, because I saw the statements, all the press releases that were put out from, major corporate 100 brands saying, we want to invest this into the Black community. We want to support, Black businesses. And so I'm like, okay, well, if this is what's happening in this moment, right, let's take advantage of the momentum. I'm a community that's been around for 14 years. I've done great things. We have, set a standard for what this looks like for Black women entrepreneurs. Let's partner up. And of course, the reception wasn't what I would have hoped it to be. But I'm a firm believer in, all you need is that one yes, right? So I don't get discouraged. I just kept knocking on doors and kept pushing till I found that one person that understood that this is more than just a conversation. We need to really get into action. And that was my partners at Sage, who, when I launched the Boss Impact Fund and decided I wanted to raise $10 million over the next 3 years to invest in 500 Black women, they said, we'll give you the first 1.5 million. And that to me was a game changer.
I want to hit on this thing. It's a form of what we now call performative justice, if you will. It was a language that kind of came out of many of the pledges and the moves that were made by corporations during in the post the murder of George Floyd and during COVID. And that's this thing that does things that are nice things that don't really make a difference. And you said that about, a lot of times you can't take exposure to the bank, and you can't take those awards to the bank. Like, it's wonderful, right. Yes, like you said, I like, if you're a Black person in America with any consistent accomplishments and the contributions, on some level, you're going to have a nice collection of awards and trophies. And I say this, I'm going to speak for both of us. We are not saying we don't appreciate it.
Absolutely not.
But
yeah.
Especially as a business owner, when all is said and done, the best thing you can do to show me you value what I do is to financially invest, either directly or indirectly, in my business. Or I always tell people the best networking content is a paying customer.
Yes.
If you're going to introduce me to somebody, titles and positioning is great, but a paying customer is the best networking contact you can have. And again, that's one of the reasons I appreciate both the history of the Boss Network, which, when all is said and done, was about connecting people to one another and people to resources. And now the current mission of the Boss Network that says, we should be celebrated, but how do we change the paradigm of business success and business growth, particularly for Black women? If you give me a trophy, that's a beautiful thing, but I already know costs, $100 maybe. Again, no shade on the awards. Absolutely. And people that give it to you and the sentiment, but it's not the same as saying, in addition to that, I'm going to fund your mission. I'm going to be a partner. This is not going to be a transaction the night of this dinner. This is going to be a relationship where I'm sharing resources and money and connections to help you advance your mission. So, I get what you're saying about Sage stepping up and saying, okay, we'll start with the first 1.5 million.
And I've never gotten an award from them.
Right.
But let me tell you, that check, it meant a lot more to me than, something that I can put on my mantle. Because the reality is, if you're talking about someone who's been in business for almost 14 years, the validation, it does matter. If Forbes did not highlight me, as a, top business, I wouldn't be able to probably go and work with some of the brands that I've worked with, right?
Right.
So those validations, those awards, they do mean something. But when you get to a certain level and that's all you're getting, you cannot scale, you cannot grow. And then it starts to feel a little, backwards. Like, okay, what am I doing here? Am I just doing this for the accolades, or am I going to actually be able to have some real impact in my community? Because that's what it boils down to, the impact. And for me, I saw myself in a position where I've inspired, I know for a fact, I've inspired probably millions of Black women through the connection of the Boss Network to start businesses, right? But how do we actually grow? How do we actually scale? Because there is studies that show, Black women are leading the charge when starting businesses, but there's still only probably less than half that are actually successful, financially successful, because they don't have the resources to scale their businesses. So, we need that type of support that's going to help us take it to the next level. And that's what I wanted to do. And the next phase, if you want to call it Boss 2.0, is like, okay, now what's the next thing that I'm going to do? I've inspired, I've motivated, I've encouraged. Now, what can we do next to help these women really create some legacies and some financial, structures in their families and in their households and in their communities, right? How do we make that change? How do we change the trajectory of our lives by actually truly being entrepreneurs that can change the economic, landscape of our communities? And that's, for me, what the Boss Impact Fund represents.
So talk to me a bit about, you set a goal of raising funding for 500 plus, at least 500 Black women entrepreneurs over the next 3 years. Where you are on that trajectory, and why did you set that as your initial goal for the Boss Network 2.0?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I looked at the numbers and I saw, like you said, there was less than like 1% of Black women. And at the time when I launched it 2 years ago, there was probably, I think, about 10, literally 10 Black female founders that had raised $1 million plus, just 10, right? So I'm thinking to myself, like, this is insane. If only 10 Black women in the course of, this last 10 plus years of Black women entrepreneurs been thriving, has raised capital, how important would it be for me to be able to impact 500 Black women over the next 3 years? And to me, that was a very small number, but I understand our impact. When we, in our community, when one of us wins, it changes the lives of hundreds of people, right? Because we have, people that are watching us. We have, people that we are employing. We have people that are, working for us. So I knew that if I can impact 500 women, that would probably reach 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 people impacted, if not more. And so for me, it was just like, a simple goal, but it was a lofty goal, right? And so you're talking about trying to raise $10 million and we're still at 1.5. Now, I am going into 2023 with possibly another $1 million, hopefully if it all works out. And then we're also working on something in South Africa to build, to start a grant program there. So there are some, things that are in motion that we're taking into 2023. But I feel like, with everything that was happening around us, that $10 million should have been completed in the first year. But we're still striving. We're still moving. We were able to invest in 35 Black female founders this year. And what we gave them was not just a grant, but we also gave them a 1-year scholarship to our Boss Business University, which really was a game changer. Because, if beyond anything, mentorship and support, it is vital for entrepreneurial success. And so having them be a part of this program where they get to be a part of the community, where they know that they're not alone as a solo founder, they have other people cheering for them. They have other founders that are going through the same thing that they're going through. They have actual mentors that are experts in certain areas around digital marketing, finance, all these different areas, customer service that they can lean on and glean wisdom from and learn strategies. Like, that has been the game changer. And when we did our 6-month survey, that was the biggest thing that they talked about. The money, the grant was amazing. I mean, it's $10,000. So it's it can help, but it's not going to change everything, right? But that mentorship that is priceless. That's a game
You
changer.
know, I totally agree. As you know, I've judged, business pitch competitions now for probably more than
Yeah.
25 years. And
Yeah.
I'm always advising entrepreneurs, including the ones that I end up mentoring, is that yes, the money is important. Yes, whether you win the $10,000 grant, the $25,000 grant, or whether you get $2 million in angel, whatever the money is, no one is saying the money is not important. The money is critical, but it's the, like you said, the mentorship, the skills, the expertise, the relationships that comes
Yeah.
with that money. Because there's no use having the money if you really don't know what to do with the money to make it really work for your business. And so
Absolutely.
I'm currently a mentor with the Black Ambition program, Pharrell's initiative, and, you just can't say enough about the real value is not the money. I mean, it's the money because the money's necessary. It's a minimum requirement. But if you get that, but you don't get the relationships, if you don't get the door openers, the
Yeah.
introductions, the listen, don't say this, say that. Don't go here,
Hmm.
go there. Because
Right.
in the case of, and I'm going to speak specifically about Black people and Black women, if you're successful as an entrepreneur and you're scaling your business, you're going into territory that no one like you has been before. You're going into
Absolutely.
rooms that no one like you has been before. It's like, your was born in Mississippi. Mine was born in Virginia. My mother knew when she sent me off to college, she was sending me into a world that she knew nothing about. The best she could do was to get me to go, but she didn't understand anything that was going on. And so you're
Absolutely.
and so you're competing in the marketplace where the person next to you
Yep.
has generations of relationships and understanding
Generation.
about this is how it works, and this is where you find the money, and this is what you do, and this is how you do it.
Right.
And so I know I'm kind of spending a lot of time on it because I think it's important to understand. And again, this
Yeah.
does talk about the value of the Boss Network. It's not just the money. It's
No.
being part of the ecosystem so that the knowledge and the
Yes.
information and the
Yeah.
inside unspoken things that is never going to appear in a
Right.
book and it's never going to be talked about in a class, but your
Yeah.
your counterparts know, but you don't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. And let's talk about that a little bit deeper, Alfred, because I hear a lot of my community members talk about wanting access to mentors. And I tell them all the time, mentorship is great, right? But let's be honest, most successful people are busy. You might can get a call once a month, but what are you going to do in between time? And that's why we didn't just offer mentoring, but we also offer coaching and training,
Yes.
right? Because that those small cohorts of groups that you're being able to learn from experts, that's going to help you up level. So if you don't get additional VC capital, you can actually figure out, how do I use customer service to actually gain loyal customers, drive sales, right? Digital marketing, get access to new customers via social media. So those type of things, it matters so much. And your mentor is not going to spend that type of time walking through those strategies with you. They'll give you advice on how to handle certain situations, but that's why we have to show up. And I tell people, the reason I am successful today, and it took me a long time to get to where I am, but I showed up for everything. I showed up for every conference, for every workshop, for every training. I mean, I was moderating and leading a lot of it, but I'm sitting there learning from all these people. How could you not be successful when you are gleaning all that wisdom and learning so much? So I tell people, I'm not an expert in probably, anything, but I am like, I know a little of everything. Like my brain is like, it's so full of so much stuff because I've listened to the Alfred Edmonds, the D Marshalls, the all the different business experts out there that have shared wisdom and knowledge and strategies. And I'm taking all that in. And so we have to value, just as much as we value money, we have to value learnings, lifelong learnings, because it's so important to our growth.
No, you're such a strong representation of what I tell people, that successful entrepreneurs, especially those who are trying to raise money, understand that after what can you invest in me? What can you give me? The second question is,
Mhm.
what can I learn from you? And
Yes.
often you may get a no for the investment. And I tell people, entrepreneurs don't walk away after they hear the no. The next question is, okay, well, you can't give me this in this case, money or investment. What can you teach me? What can I learn from you? Who can you introduce me to, so that the investment goes far beyond this particular piece of investment? And oh, by the way, usually down the line, the investment will come. If you're learning, you're picking up stuff,
Hmm.
you're engaging, you're following
Yeah.
through when somebody gives you a resource
Right.
or connection, there you're
Yeah.
still maintaining the relationship. And down the line, they're like, okay, I've seen you in action. I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you more
And
than
let me
you
tell
asked
you,
for.
yes, I love that because I tell when I talk one on one to my clients, I'm always teaching them like there's a certain level of strategy that we have to learn that they grew up in,
Yes,
that our counterparts they grew up in this, and so we have to learn it. And so I'm trying to teach them like value people, value relationships, and not for just what you can get in the moment because you never know what can come down the line. Me working with Black Enterprise, a lot of that was me serving, inviting my network to conferences, volunteering at events, but I was building relationships behind the scenes with people who actually could change my life. And so I remember, I think it was like the first elevator pitch competition you guys did in 2010 with the cash flow. And I, promoted it to my network. And, one of my members actually made it to the final three and she was dope. And so I knew she would win. I just had that confidence in her. And regardless, I knew that I was going to take advantage of the opportunity. So I came to Atlanta. I created my own event called I think it was called Entrepreneurs Connect. And I did it at the W Hotel, which was a hotel near Black Enterprise Conference. And everyone came after the conference because she actually won. And I remember talking to Butch Graves and Damon John, and they were like, how did you plan an event for someone that you did not know was going to win? And I say, we came to Atlanta. We already won. You understand me? We came to Atlanta. So in my mind, we already won. I'm from Chicago, from the West Side. I've never had these type of opportunities before. So to be here, I've already won. And I was going to make sure that I left with connections, and I knew that back then you all really didn't have a lot of social activities after the conference. So it was my way to get in and create something where I could actually build relationships. And I had all the judges show up for that. And so one of the judges from the cash flow literally was like, you are dope. I'm going to give you a $10,000 grant and free mentorship. I didn't even have to pitch, Alfred. I don't even know if you know that.
I did not know
And
that.
to this day, yeah, to this day, Luke Riggins is one of my mentors, has been my mentor for probably 14 years since I met him. But they gave me $10,000 grant and I never pitched for it. It was just being in the room and providing a space for Black women. And then I got to be a part of another pitch competition through a program called Power Moves NOLA with Essence. And I didn't win that competition, but I gained mentorship that changed my life. And literally, I got taught more about finance and how to scale my business financially when a lot of times I wasn't even looking at my books because I felt like, well, I'm not making any money. What am I, keeping up with this stuff for? And he taught me how to look at my revenue, see what's working, what's not working. And I promise you, I literally tripled my revenue the next year from those conversations. And so I tell you, relationships matter, people matter. That is your business.
Again, you're a perfect guest for Beyond the Hype. You're long overdue, and I definitely got to have you back. So, but let me
For
shift the
sure.
conversation to um, what you would say to. I'm gonna use the broad term corporate America. Sage is on board. I think you're going to be successful in bringing some other companies on board. But we heard a lot of promises about, lasting change, ending systemic inequities. Some companies now we're almost 2 years later are kind of following through, but we already know it's already been reported that some companies have started initiatives in 2020, 2021 are kind of backing off of it. Now, of course, they're saying, oh, there's inflation. We're looking at a possible recession. So they have a legitimate reason, if you will. I'm using legitimate in quote marks because the things that you're really committed to, you figure out a way to do it no matter what. But we're in
Absolutely.
an environment where um,
The
many
momentum is
companies could
going down.
stand to be held accountable for what they said
Yeah,
they were going to. When you're saying you're committing to systemic change, that's not something where only in good economic times you commit to that. So my
absolutely.
broader question is, what should we as a community,
Mhm.
what should Black women entrepreneurs as a
Yeah.
community be saying to corporate America about around this idea?
Mhm.
Don't just celebrate us. Don't just showcase us during Black History Month and now Juneteenth. Don't just invite
Right.
us to give a speech at your event or to your ERG group inside the company or whatever.
Yeah.
Marshal your resources, your connections, and yes, your money in such a way that it actually
Mhm.
drives the top line and bottom line of Black women-owned entrepreneurs, whether it's through the Boss Network or through some other mechanism? What should we be requiring, requesting, maybe in some cases demanding of the corporations that, when all said and done, still relies on the spending of Black consumers as a big part of their ability to make a profit in their business or their industry?
Yeah. Yeah. So my first conversation is going to be to us as Black women and as minority entrepreneurs. I think that we need to really speak up to those brands that we support, that we work with, that we are investing in, right? Because we are probably the largest number of consumers that spend trillions of dollars in the marketplace, Black women, and so we should hold those that we support accountable, and write letters to the brands that you work with and say, hey, what organizations are you investing in? If you see organizations like the Boss Network, like Harlan Capital, these investment funds that you see trying to do things to change the landscape and the disparity for funding for Black women and minority businesses, say, hey, these are some organizations that I would love to see you all support. They're doing great things in the community. Speak up, because it takes a community of us to say, hey, we need to see change, not just one of us. We can't just depend on our few leaders to do everything. We have to speak up as a whole and say, we want to see some changes happening. You made these commitments. We want to know where this money is going, how this money is being spent, what organizations are you supporting? If you need to know organizations, here are the organizations that we believe in that has supported us for years. That's the conversation that needs to be had. Now, on the corporate side, my conversation would be, you are not really investing, you're reinvesting. These communities have supported, big brands. I'm not going to name names, but all the big brands that are out there for years. We're using, insurance agencies. We're using, beverage products. We're using banking institutions. We're using all of these industries, and we're supporting them day in and day out with our consumerism. And so we need to see that support happen. And if you have, organizations or leaders that you're working with, invest in those leaders. Help them to be able to do the work that they're doing. And as you said before, don't just celebrate us, but help elevate us. And so that is my conversation, with brands and with, the minority community. Like, we need to hold each other accountable, right? And it can't just be a momentum, a fly by night thing. Like, we're in this time where we want to see this happen, and then the momentum dies out. Like, no, this has to keep going.
Yeah, Cameka, that's so powerful. I mean, I'm glad during this whole conversation you made sure that this is a dual accountability conversation. Yes, we
Yeah.
can look at corporate America and say, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, and we're going to hold you
Right.
accountable. But you've also spent a lot of time talking about, one, us needing to speak up and not
Absolutely.
assuming that corporations know which organizations and what you need.
Right.
And also to be prepared, because again, if and when the capital comes, the only way more is going to come is if what we've received is managed in a way that says, oh, this was actually a good investment. When all is said and done, the corporation is going to do what they think is a good investment.
Right. They have a bottom line
Yeah.
too. Even from a philanthropic standpoint, they still have a bottom line. And I tell, like, I had, these 35 women that I've been working with this year, we're, like 7 months into the program with them. And then, next year in March, we'll be bringing in another group of entrepreneurs. And so I told them, I said, your success is my success. Like, this program cannot succeed if you all don't get involved, because I still have to show an ROI. I still have to show KPIs. I still need to show these brands that you're showing up for the trainings. You feel like these trainings are benefiting you. You're seeing progress in your business. You're leveraging the different skill sets that you're learning through this program. And then you're actually giving me feedback. I need testimonials. I need video, videos showing that, you all are benefiting from this. And so, I tell them it is an accountability on your part as well, not just to get the funding, but also to show up for the program. Because, a lot of times, like you said, we're not getting the funding because they don't really see the value. So we have to show them that we have what it takes to be successful in these different business arenas. Because you can get to the table, right? And say, for instance, you get a purchase order for 1,000, products. Do you even have the infrastructure to make that happen? So there is some things that we need to do And we need to keep showing up. We need to keep showing up and taking advantage and value, but then also speaking up for the things that we want to see change. And I was recently watching this documentary on the Black Panthers, and it was interesting to me because it just I just feel like, and a lot of times in our community we have these amazing organizations or groups that come together to try to create change. But then with anything, people get tired, because there's going to be systems that's going to try to break those things down, that's going to try to, dismantle, growth. And that's why we called it the Invest in Progress program, not change, because there is no change without progress. And so I was very specific, like, this is invest in progress, because we need to see progress happening before we can actually see the change that we all desire to see within this country.
And the other point is the point that I really wanted to really bring to light. Fatigue does set in, like when the cameras are no longer on. I mean, yes, for a lot of reasons, none of them pleasant. The whole nation, the whole world was energized in 2020. I mean, not for good reasons. Nobody wanted to see a man die on national television. Nobody wanted to see a pandemic that caused both the societal health, loss of life, jobs, business. We went through something, but it did energize all of us, and I mean us as individuals and as companies. Great. But what happens when that's yesterday's news? And what we're
Right.
seeing, and as I'm saying, if you don't change systems, if you don't do it
Yeah.
day in and day out, if it's not part of your
Right.
DNA. So it's what you're communicating to entrepreneurs. This has to be
Yeah.
what you do, because here's what I envision for you. You'll get an award 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But the award
Yeah.
will be for saying, look, there are 6 companies that came through this Sage
Yes.
Investment Initiative or some other program of the Boston Network that are now multi-million-dollar companies that started
Yeah.
out as, small companies or smaller companies. And
Mhm.
so again, you're being rewarded for the ROI you're delivering, not just
Yes.
because you're, a good leader who's doing the right thing. So it is
Right.
about bottom line results. And of course,
Yeah.
the companies that supported the Boston Network will take credit for that too. They can say, look, we
Mhm.
put our money where our mouths are. It's not just about writing a
Right.
check. We can show
Yeah.
that our investment paid off because these were 5 startups that are now employing people, generating economic activity. I'm passionate about this because the reason I love pitch competitions and being a judge is like, we judges are investing your money. The win is when you look up and see that 80% or 90% of the businesses that you gave a grant to are thriving. That's
Exactly.
that's a measure of success that you could put that up against anything, and no longer about being black or female. It's like, no, this is
Yeah.
good this is a good business investment. And that's
Right.
what you're doing when you create this network that's not just about grants,
Mhm.
but about the academy and about relationship building and about holding the people who receive the grants accountable. But no, you need to do
Right.
something with this to make this work.
Yeah. It's so funny you said that, because I literally, my 10th year anniversary was literally the year before the pandemic. And that's a really kind of like a life changing moment to have been doing anything for 10 years. And then you have this entire like world changing thing happening around you. Part of you feels like, well, maybe I'm at the end. Maybe this has been a good run. Maybe I should be thinking about what's my next. And God just put something in me and was like, it's time for something different, but not new. It's not new. It's just going to be different. And so I told myself I was going to move out of the inspiration game, the motivation game, into the money and investment game.
Yes.
And at this point, my legacy will be these 500,000 Black female owned businesses that I invested in and asked for nothing in return. But in return, it's going to change the trajectory of so many communities, so many lives. And that will be my legacy. And that's what I wanted. I know that I've done great work. My mother, she passed this year, and I feel like her legacy is her children, right? But I have a legacy that I'm trying to leave behind, and some things that I want to do, like start a school in her honor in Africa. I want to be able to have some impact in this world that lives beyond us, because it's all temporary, right? But it's about, what are you leaving behind? And for me, being able to change someone's life. And that's why I got into education. Like I knew as an educator, I couldn't give these students anything, but I could change their lives by just pouring into them because that's what somebody did for me.
And I know I briefly want to address, and I know you just in part in celebration of your mother, the honorary doctorate degree that you accepted. Again, as I said at the top of
Yeah.
the show, you came out of the pandemic, Dr. Cameka Smith. But
Right.
talk briefly, share with the Beyond the Hype audience
Yeah.
what that is and why it means so much to you, and how you initially
Yeah.
was like, nah, nah, and then you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. So, so I had, because like I said, you getting me, I'm a believer. And so I feel like as and I have decided a long time ago that God is the CEO of my business,
amen.
and I'm the person that he instilled to found it. And I'm the one who's, doing the day-to-day operations, but he runs this business. And that's why I know that all the opportunities, all the things that I need, it always is going to be provided some way, somehow. And it always does. But I do believe that he has to put you in certain positions because of where he wants to take you. And so earlier this year, right after my mom passed, I was, given an honorary doctorate in business and entrepreneurship. And that is huge for a person who did not go to school for business, who does not have an MBA to get an honorary doctorate. I graduated with Les Brown. Do you understand me? I sat on the same stage as Les Brown and got my honorary doctorate degree in entrepreneurship and business. And to me, that was God saying, well done, Cameka. Oh, I don't want to get emotional, Alfred, but and then right after that, when my mom passed, I was just like torn because I was like, wow, she had a legacy that she was trying to create too, through servanthood and through inspiring people to just believe in something bigger than themselves. And her life was, cut short at 61 years old. And I was trying to figure out, how do I keep her legacy going? And then I got asked to receive a honorary doctorate in theology and Christian leadership, because everybody knows that I'm a believer. People who follow me, they know that about me. And so I was just like, oh, I just got an honorary doctorate, I don't need another one. It just wasn't something that I felt like I needed. And so, but I understood when God is trying to take you somewhere, he will set you up for some things. And so I just happened to tell the lady, like, you know what, to be honest, I appreciate this university for wanting to honor me as a Christian leader, but my mom was the real deal. Like, she was, a minister. She was ordained. She had just got ordained as a pastor, but passed away before she can even do her first sermon because of COVID. Our church was closed. And so I was like, if anything, she would deserve that, and they basically went back and decided that they would give my mom an honorary doctorate. Now, that to me shows that even if you do work that you feel like nobody sees, nobody, is acknowledging you. My mother never got an award. I gave her an award at one of my conferences before because I knew that she was my hero, right? But she never got an award from any business community or any leaders in the community for the work that she did. But God made sure that in her passing, that she still was able to accomplish her goals, and so she always talked about getting her doctorate degree. My mother just had a GED. She always talked about getting her doctorate degree. And I was like, Mommy, that's a lofty goal. You got to go to school for a long time. But she was so committed, like, well, if you went to school, I can go to school, and I'm like, well, you're right. And for her, even in her passing, to get that acknowledgement, it shows me that it's just no limit. And even if it doesn't happen in this lifetime, just keep doing good works and it will happen. And so now with her honorary doctorate degree, I'm going to make sure that her ministry goes on, that we open up a school in Africa in her honor, that will be a school of hope and, teaching about, Christianity and God, because that's what she wanted. And so that legacy will continue through me. And that's what I want to happen within our community through these businesses and through all the things that we want for ourselves. We are creating legacies that will live on beyond us. And that's what I think about when I think about my ancestors, my great great grandparents and those that were in slavery and those that, were, shipped over here, and were forced to, work without pay. Like, we are reaping the benefits of their hard work. And so we should do our best to honor them. And that to me is how we repay, the ancestors, by working hard and doing what they worked so hard for us to have the opportunity to do.
As a fellow believer, we touch and agree on that. So
Absolutely.
listen, as we wrap up our conversation, which I knew I was going to enjoy, I often can't believe I get paid to do this show. I get to talk to all my favorite
Because
people.
you're so good at
Talking
it.
with people I'm really interested in about things I like to know about.
Yes.
What's the best way for the Beyond the Hype audience to stay in touch with what you do, follow up with what you do, take advantage of the
Mhm.
resources that you're offering, or
Yes.
support, whatever way?
Yeah,
What's the best way for them to just to stay in support of the
absolutely.
Boss Network
Yeah.
and connected to you?
Yes. So, the best way, everything is social now, everything is digital. So, if you see us doing great works, give us a shout out, let people know because the world is watching, the world is watching and brands are paying attention to what people and the consumers talk about. So if you see the work that we're doing and it inspires you, tag a brand or, say, hey, are you supporting this organization? They're doing great works in the Black community, and just cheer us on because I have an amazing team of about 6 Black women who work hard day in and day out to make this happen. And so just cheer us on and thank us for the things that we're doing, because it's a day-to-day, struggle, but we're committed to this work. And then, I encourage everyone to, follow the Boss Network on social media and join the Boss Network as a community. And, we'll launch our second round of grants in January of 2023. So apply. I think a lot of times people are intimidated to apply because they feel like, well, I'm not going to win. But you never know. You never know. And so when you put your efforts out there, it will be rewarded. So I just encourage them to, visit thebossnetwork.org and, apply for the grants, sign up for the programs, attend those trainings. We do a lot of things, at no cost because that's just what I want to do as far as a give back, and show up. I tell my students all the time that I work with through the Boston Campus program, those that show up, go up. It's simple.
Well, and we're talking going to the bossnetwork.org to access all these resources and the inspiration. You're still in the inspiration motivation business. You're still doing it, but I get
I
it.
can't help it. I can't help it,
But
right?
that money
I'm a,
investment,
I'm, a preacher's child. So
your teacher's child. But I get your ministry has been elevated. So I deeply appreciate it. And I deeply appreciate you, Cameka. Thank you for being a
yeah.
guest today on Beyond the Hype.
And can I say this before I go?
Sure.
I appreciate you, Alfred, because let me tell you, it is because of people like you who answer the call. You have been a mentor to me. You have always given me a platform to talk about the work that I'm doing, to elevate myself as a thought leader, to just instill in me when I'm like trying to figure out how to make things happen. You have never hesitated to give me a connection or a resource. And I thank you for that because the reality is, as a leader, you cannot get to where you're going if you don't have people that are instilling in you how to be a great leader. Because I didn't just, of course, there's some things I was born with because I was created this way. But a lot of the learnings that I've had has been because of other leaders like you who have said, you know what, I believe in her. I'm going to pour into her. I'm going to support her. And for that, I am grateful. And I appreciate the Black Enterprise family for always having my back and supporting me.
Cameka, thank you so much for myself and on behalf of the team at Black Enterprise. I'll definitely pass it on.
Yes.
Yeah. So the feeling is mutual. Again, we all pour into one another, and that's how 1+1 makes 5, or 1+1 makes 7, or
That's
with
right.
God, 1+1 makes infinity. So that's how we're going to lean into it. You just heard another edition of Beyond the Hype. This episode was brought to you by Now and Later, the long-lasting chew. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.